This is Test Case Scenario with me, your host, Jason Baum. This podcast is the definitive hub for knowledge and stories in the software testing and development communities. If you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe button and let's dive straight into the episode. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Test Case Scenario. I'm your host, Jason Baum, and with me as always is Marcus Merrell. Marcus, welcome back.
Thanks.
Marcus, your shirt matches the picture on the wall behind you, and I just feel like I have to call that out because either you're hypnotizing me right now or this was just really a cool planning job by you. I don't know. What is it?
I think we can see what I'm drawn to.
Yes. Fantastic. And oh my gosh, guess who it is? It's Evelyn Coleman. Evelyn, welcome back.
How's it going? I would consider it maybe like a tropical paisley, but it's not actually paisley. For those of us listening who can't see what Marcus is wearing.
It's the shirt or the painting. The painting is an Angela Navarro. You want to, or I'll give her a little plug. But yeah, it's nice. I love it.
If you ever went to the mall in the 90s, do you remember those magic eye paintings? And there are pictures and you walk by and you have to like squint and they're like, no, seriously, there's a sailboat in there. I'm kind of getting that vibe right now. Like if I squint, what can I see in there? All right. We can't jump the shark at the beginning of the show. We cannot jump the shark at the beginning of the show. And special guest today, we are very lucky to be joined by Marc Hornbeek. Marc, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I was saying Marc and I have known each other for several years through his work with the DevOps Institute and DevOps.com. But Marc, you've been in the industry for a while. You are the CEO and principal consultant at Engineering DevOps Consulting, author of books, Engineering DevOps, Continuous Testing, Quality, Security, and Feedback, which is why, one of the reasons why you're here today. Ambassador, author, instructor for DevOps Institute, blogger on DevOps.com, Cloud Native Now, Security Boulevard, which would be the TechStrong banner. And Marc is globally recognized as a strategic consultant who applies engineering practices holistically for continuous testing, DevOps, DevSecOps, and SRE digital transformations. And I'm very excited about the new book, Continuous Testing, Quality, Security, and Feedback, that's out now. So very excited to have you on.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here too. Glad you guys reached out.
Yeah, awesome. So let's talk continuous testing. I mean, we could really go anywhere with this one. It's a pretty broad topic. How many pages is the book, Marc?
Oh gosh, I think it's like 300 and something. I don't know. I didn't count it. That's a good point. I have it here. 322.
Continuous testing, quality, security, and feedback. There's quite a bit to say, and you can really go anywhere with the topic.
If you stand back from it, it's basically all about the second way of DevOps, right? My first book was kind of about the first way, how to implement flow and other aspects too, but it mostly had to do with implementing flow. But this one's more about the second way, all the feedback aspects of DevOps and integrating that.
I want to hear about the feedback aspects, but first I want to ask, what was the inspiration to write the book?
Well, that's it. I mean, what I find, honestly, because I do most of the time I'm doing consulting work with clients, and I also see in a lot of the industry reports that people are struggling to get from a basic level of functioning DevOps with some level of CI and some level of CD, maybe continuous deployment as well. But they're stuck, right? The unicorns don't have a problem because they got all the resources in the world. But the great majority of everybody else sort of gets stuck, not because DevOps is particularly complicated. It's just that there's a lot of moving parts to get right. And once you get past that kind of first way, then understanding the second way, along the way towards higher levels of maturity is important. So it's really just to help people. I'm at this point in my career, I'm an old guy, an old curmudgeon. I just want to help people. And this is a book to help people. It's not really to make money. It's really to inform. And I have a lot of opinions, of course, like an old curmudgeon would, about how to do things. I'm guilty of being quite prescriptive in the way I explain how DevOps should be done and how it should evolve. Some people criticize me for that, actually. But, I have a way that I know works, and I've seen it work that way, and I've seen it not work in other ways. So that's really what it's all about, trying to give people a prescription for how to accomplish many of what we talk about when we say the second way of DevOps.
Along those lines, let's say the primary audience would be, like, who would get the most benefit from reading this? What stage do they need to be at?
Sure. So it's a pretty broad audience. I think it's readable by people in SRE, DevOps, DevSecOps, or QA at pretty much any level. I think the ones that would benefit the most will tend to be people in leadership positions that are trying to move their organization from one level of maturity to a higher level of maturity, because the book really, gives the most detail on that aspect of how do you execute a transformation of a lot of moving parts in a way that, makes sense for any particular organization. It's not that you can have a one-size-fits-all. Nobody's saying that, but it provides methods and tools, and actually to help you figure out what's the best path for you and what's the best target for you in the next leg of your journey. And then, how do you continue that journey and without having to do 3 steps forward and 10 steps back type of thing.
For those who haven't read the Phoenix Project, how do you define the first way, second way, third way?
My formal definition of continuous feedback, because I really refer to it as continuous feedback, because the idea is to provide feedback on an ongoing basis. I refer to it as a strategy. That's a little bit different than I think some of the other books talk about it, but it's a strategy that uses basically stakeholder and user feedback to accelerate, release frequency and improve recovery times, as measured by the implementation of feedback and its impact on the system's reliability and things like that. So it's really about using data to make improvements. There's no formal definition. I mean, after all these years, there's still no formal definition of DevOps. Everybody seems to have their own, but I think it is important for everybody to have a definition, at least in the context of your organization, so that you know whether you've accomplished it or not.
Yeah. Thank you for writing the book. I think a lot of organizations.
Can I flash it up?
Please show it up.
Oh, anybody that's on the webinar, I can send out a PDF version if you like.
Yeah. And it's on the podcast. Get it on Amazon as well as other places. So as far as like where to begin, I guess let's talk digital transformation, continuous testing. How do you see continuous testing as a foundational pillar for successful digital transformations in large enterprises? And like, how do you see it evolving in an agile environment?
Again, I think a lot of the folks out there that describe continuous testing as basically almost synonymous with automating testing, but it's actually a lot more than that. Again, I would use the word strategy. It's a strategy intended to reduce lead times, reduce failure rates, accelerate delivery pipelines, help prepare quality, and as part of the quality equation. It's not the same as continuous quality, but it contributes to the quality equation. It does that through using automation in all the different aspects of testing, which is certainly more than just test execution. I define 9 sub-pillars of continuous testing, and also other iterative processes that are validated as you go iteratively. The general idea is to decrease the time from code commit to production. That's how DevOps looks at it anyways, although in the broader sense, it's more than, addressing more than just a pipeline view, because you can have, as you said, it really depends on having good testing prepared ahead of CI, right? And in fact, really excellent testing in development is a sign of maturity that would certainly make the CI/CD pipeline go a lot smoother and make releases a lot better. We talk about trying to reduce failures in production, and that's the strategic part of it. There's no such thing as 100% testing, just like there's no such thing as 100% quality or reliability. What you're trying to do is understand what are the important things that customers and other stakeholders are going to care about, and make sure you cover those things, right? You don't want to waste time just trying to do like parametric testing where you're trying to cover all possible permutations and combinations of things. You're trying to determine what's important for, the use cases and configurations that your stakeholders care about, including customers, not just customers though.
Yeah, it's about risk management.
Yeah, risk management is certainly a key part of it, absolutely. But being able to operationalize the solution as well is part of it for the stakeholders that are more operational oriented.
How do you see testing having evolved in the last few years and evolving into the future in relates to all this?
Honestly, this is where I get a little, I appreciate your question. I really do. I have in my heart some pain, if you like, because back in the mid 70s, actually, probably shouldn't name names, but Glenford Myers wrote the Art of Software Testing in the mid 70s. And a lot of people latched onto that book as a kind of a guide for software testing. Unfortunately, a lot of things haven't changed because what he said in one of the axioms in that book, he said that the people doing testing should not be the same people writing the code because that's a conflict of consciousness. You need somebody else to validate. And what I've learned over the years, I've been fortunate to have access to a lot of data over the years and a lot of different environments, that is actually not true. In fact, it's taken the industry in the direction of over-reliance on independent type of testing rather than having the developer being supported with proper training and tooling and motivations to do great testing so that it can be done within the scope of the developer's job. And it's a satisfying thing when they do. And I have found that there's an inverse relationship between the highest quality products and the number of independent testers. You really want, the development work to be really high quality in the first place. And there's techniques to do that. In a lot of environments, they haven't done the things necessary to do that because they think that's not what they're supposed to do. They think they're supposed to have some independent team. And unfortunately, that still prevails. But the more enlightened organizations I do notice are moving in the direction of, trying to provide easy to use platforms for developers and proper training, tooling, and motivations to get, more testing done earlier. In fact, this idea of shifting left, shifting right, all that. I mean, I have a prediction, mainly because of how AI is evolving as well, is that I kind of imagine 5 years from now, we're going to be talking about no shift, right? Where you just do development in production. And you do it, but you're so tooled, it's a safe thing to do, right? With all the ways of isolating code in a smart way with things that love the nature of feature flagged with something a little more intelligent than that. And but having at your fingertips as an individual developer, all the different test types and test tools so instantly available that you can safely do testing in production. So, but that's a ways out yet, but I think that's where I see it evolving. Definitely not too many people are anywhere close to that yet. I see certainly in large organizations, there's still a lot of dependence on independent quality assurance after CI and usually before deployment. And a lot of them still haven't even grasped the notion of, the progressive deployments where you can do at least some of the testing in production safely. The more enlightened ones are definitely moving in that direction. I know back in the early days when I was at Bell Northern, it was a very informed environment, a really advanced environment back in, honestly, the late 70s and early 80s. We were doing a lot of these things back then. We didn't know you weren't supposed to, I guess. We had a platform that developer didn't have to even specify the test environment. He could just write the tests that he wanted to run, and the test would include some meta tags that would automatically set up the test environment accordingly and run the tests accordingly. It was, made it really easy for the developer.
Marc, in that scenario, what comes of the role of QA? Is there still a role for QA?
There's certainly a role for QA today in the different environments. That's typical. If you have QA where you have really complex products that require the integration of multiple products to make up a service, then I think there's still a role for QA, even in the long run, in that regard, right? To have if you really need to put together multiple services that are independently tested as a set of services to make up a grander service, then I think there's a key role for that will be sustained for a long time.
Do you think that there is more of a need for independent testing in products and situations where it's not a product that the developers could ever envision themselves using? So if it's like an accessibility product or a product that's specifically for like children or somebody, like some audience that people that are in tech may not relate to off the bat, that it could be important to have independent testing in those scenarios?
There have been plenty of cases where there's some really complex products that were highly well tested without having a big QA or organization. And I've been party to some of those. But certainly it's true that whoever's doing development needs to have a pretty good grasp of what the use cases for the product is. And I think that's one of the failures I see in a lot of organizations that misinterpret what Agile was meant to be, right? One of the Agile manifestos is working code over documentation. And some people think, well, that means that instead of having a well thought out design, you're supposed to iterate yourself way to a good design rather than actually designing it right in the first place. So I'm not in favor of that approach. In fact, the best successes that I've seen have done a lot upfront to simulate a product before they bother to even implement it. So a lot of the validation was at the system level simulation. So you try to simulate as much as you can before you implement much of anything. And so there's still the idea of incremental, but the incremental is not taking it all the way through all the steps of product development or release. It's incremental at the simulation level. So you get a lot of feedback about your ideas. And again, all stakeholder aspects, not just the end user aspects, all stakeholder aspects. So, the support mechanisms, the diagnostic mechanisms, the auditors mechanisms, all the mechanisms that are needed that you're going to need in the product. Think about those things up front, simulate them, then implement the product. You can still increment it incrementally. You can still have the idea of an MVP. So you just MVP the core features and maybe add some of the sustainability aspects in that later. You want to have a clear-eyed understanding of what that is before you start that path on implementing the MVP. If you do that, you're much more likely to have a successful product, and it'll actually be more efficient to accomplish than if you just, like I say, iterate yourself to a design that you probably should have had in the first place.
I love that so much.
Yeah, I think this idea of digital twins and all that is moving in that direction, I think too slowly. But I notice, in the hardware world and in a lot of systems worlds, they do a lot of simulation. If you think about the Voyager right out there in millions of miles of space, they weren't going to iterate their way to a Voyager solution, right? You had to do that. You had to think about all the different scenarios ahead of time. And here we are, 40 years later, you can still debug the darn thing and maintain it from millions of miles away. That's a critical thinking, system design, system simulation up front. There's a lot software can learn from the hardware world, even at a circuit board level or a circuit level, right? They long ago learned that you don't just go off and hard code, like literally physically with physical objects and circuits. Circuits, you first of all start off with a simulation and you simulate the hardware design before you physically implement it most of the time. So when you finally do implement it, most of it's going to work, right? That doesn't mean you have to implement the entire system at once, but you're pretty confident by the time you actually start implementing things that you've tested the different scenarios in a simulation mode. I think TDD, for example, is moving us in that direction where you sort of have a test case definition of some aspects of a requirement that you validate before you get the full product. But in my mind, that doesn't go far enough. You want to go further back and say, well, can we have a spec-driven design where you really have thought through the different aspects and simulate it? That's my pet peeve. That's just based on what I've seen. That's not typical, but I think if more did that, we'd have a lot more successful products faster, a lot more efficient.
I want to draw a little matrix of the three different aspects you talked about.
around the individual tester, the alternative to which, or the independent tester, the alternative which is a well-informed developer, which is the asterisk, well-informed, versus where AI is taking us. And I feel like in all three choices, we are in the crosshairs of making the wrong decision on all three. We're getting rid of the testers, we're not educating the developers, and we're in a fantasy land if we think that AI is there already. And yet we see companies laying off testers constantly with the excuse that our developers will do the testing and AI will do the rest. And it's like, okay, we didn't pick any of the right options of those three. Like there's a right way to make those three choices. We made them all wrong. To me, the companies that I see doing it right are the exceptions.
You're absolutely correct. I'm not going to disagree with you. I do have chapters in my book about what I think is a correct approach to use AI in its at least Gen AI in its current form. And certainly a lot of people are doing it wrong. I published a blog one time on 7 paradoxes of AI. And one of the fundamental assumptions of current Gen AI is that there's an expert at the helm. And how does a junior person ever become the expert if they're not there to learn? So it's a bit of a paradox, but fundamentally, yeah, at this point, you do need somebody that knows what they're doing to drive the tool. And also there's a misunderstanding about how much that tool should be allowed to do, in one jump. So I talk about microflows, certainly don't prompt and forget, right? I mean, work in microflows. So create a snippet, try it, trunk the work, and then build up something that you have more and more confidence with. And that all assumes that whoever's driving it knows what the hell they're looking for, knows what they're trying to accomplish. So it doesn't undermine at all, the need to have well-informed developers, as you say. They need to the best developers are really clear-eyed about what they're trying to do, or development teams, if it's a larger entity than one person can do. But yeah, so I agree with you, actually. AI is being abused, misused, misunderstood. I had one client recently, actually about a year ago. We had a large contract that we were entering into phase 3, and a competitor came in and basically got the contract because they were talking about how they could do everything with AI instead of the work we were doing. And a year later, they're coming back and saying, we need help. That didn't work too good. And I'm not surprised, honestly, right? Because I think anybody that's not using AI is making a mistake, but, use it with caution and in microflows. Then you get a lot of value out of it.
I just saw an excellent talk by this guy named Marcus Merrell, and he talked about the uses and misuses of Gen AI in its current form, primarily for testing. And oh my gosh, this guy Marcus Merrell went into it and brought it home in front of this sold out crowd, by the way, this crowd, like standing room only. But Marcus, seriously, I think you have a lot to weigh in. I think you and Mark are saying the exact same thing from your talk.
Yeah, I have seen some of Marcus's talks. I did watch some things. I'm impressed, actually, Marcus. I think you and I do have a lot of common ideas.
Yeah, I mean, the main thing is I think you have a very good take there on the idea that you shouldn't sleep on it. Like, you can't sleep on it. There is actually a there for sure. And if you do use it and you figure out the ways to avoid being irresponsible with it, then you're able to stay on that cutting edge and understand its capabilities. That way, when its capabilities increase, you can increase with them and not be stuck in the corner with your arms crossed saying, oh man, I wish I'd been there back when,
I use 3 different AI tools almost every day. Some of them you can't, some of my military clients and DHS and government clients, you can't use, like ChatGPT. But
it's really good for brainstorming, for working through blocks.
Absolutely. I sometimes get carried away and I forget that it's not human, right? And start asking it questions.
I'm endlessly polite to the AI. I always thank it for helping me. And, it's just because
exactly
I don't want to get out of that habit when I'm talking to people.
Your reason is much nicer than mine. I just don't want to be terminated, right? Like, like I'm polite to the AIs because I don't want the backlash.
She doesn't want Schwarzenegger showing up at her door.
If it wants to terminate me, it's going to. It's not going to. My politeness record is probably not going to be a factor.
Your reason is so much more wholesome than mine. I'm doing self-serving. No, it's awesome that y'all are giving out advice that isn't necessarily like, no, don't do it, or yes, do it completely. Because I do think that the nuanced talk is what gets further for people. When people are told, no, don't use something incredible, I think it just immediately they cut it off. And then rebellious people go do it without any guidance. Are developers behaving badly and so forth? If people take it wholesale without any guidance, that's a bit appropriate too. I think the small chunks and then staying on the cutting edge. For those of us just getting into it now, what would your advice be for those of us who didn't stay, consistent with it, like the three of you did? I know Jason did. I haven't been consistent with AI.
Just make sure you check its work. I mean, really, I think there's a lot to learn from how to construct a better prompt and to make sure that you don't implicitly just copy and paste whatever it's giving you. It's helpful, but it's not replacing any part of you. What do you think, Mark?
Yeah, be very, very specific in the prompt, certainly, but also when you're looking at the results, try not to ask it questions that are going to feed back, pages and pages and pages that are going to be too tiresome to review. And definitely at this point, it still makes a lot of mistakes. I mean, just as an example, last night I was asking it to do some references, lookups on some books, and it was pumping out incorrect IBSN numbers, cross-validated the numbers. They weren't the right numbers, right? It looked perfectly legitimate, but if you don't check that stuff, it can be completely wrong. I asked questions about myself, and I was amazed at some of the stuff I did that I didn't know I did. You have to, but I would recommend you use it pretty much all the time. It definitely adds value.
For creation, we don't
almost
have
anything.
writer's block
I use it
anymore.
I use it for life.
Yeah,
just
it's a great
things.
travel agent. Really,
I
good
had a
travel
problem
agent.
with an iguana in my property here in Mexico the other day, and I was asking how to deal with an iguana that was trapped by two of our dogs, and it actually came back with an answer.
It's got lots of answers, like you said. You just got to make sure they're the truth. I like to see how others perceive Gen AI now, more so than I'm keeping up with the tool itself. I know how I use it, and I'm going to use it the way I use it, and that's okay. I like to see how our especially in my role, but like how are developers? Where's developer perception of AI? And it's amazing to see how it's sort of fallen off a little bit. I think at first the overall response was, holy, this is going to change everything. And now it's very much, 2 years, it'll change everything. Right now, you can't trust it to do much. You need to have a very experienced person, like you said, behind the wheels to make sure that you're getting the information correct. And some meaningful task, maybe, but overall, you need someone who's experienced at the helm. And so I think the perception was still there's a piece of it that's definitely used, but maybe in 2 years we'll be further.
So I want to add something because I forgot to mention this.
Yeah,
I have it in my book as well, by the way. But what I call a blueprint, for example, with using AI with continuous testing, right? And it would be true for coding or other tasks for that matter. Don't just use it with prompts without some background standards in mind. So what I recommend is that for all the different aspects, on the topic of testing, you have a template that you used AI to help generate the template. So a template could be a test strategy document or a test case or a test result. There's different list of things that are associated with testing. Get a template together that if you're working with a team, to make sure you all agree with it. Maybe there's even a corporate level template required, depends on your organization and everything. But when you're working with it on a subject like, let's say, continuous testing, always make sure you reference back to the template, that you want answers given in a way that's compatible with your template. That way it doesn't stray off too far from your local standards, whatever they happen to be. Nobody's saying you have to have the same standard, but you should have a standard, all right? So if you do that, then you're more likely to get usable results that are compatible with your environment and your needs. Don't just run off and use it without, first of all, thinking about the big picture process. So even though I talk about using it in microflows, use it in the context of known macro flows. Like, yeah, you do want to have a requirement, you do want to have a strategy, you do want to have a plan, you do want to have test cases and scripts and all that. But
You want to have templates for those things. And then once you're working with those individual things, then you go into microflows, like what section of the requirements document are you working on, and do it iteratively from that point.
That point that you just made is so fantastic and is sort of this, it's kind of a microcosm. It's just like a summary of this entire episode, I think, is having a plan and a strategy. I think we've repeated that piece in all different formats throughout. This is the common theme. There was something I wanted to ask you about, and I feel like this is a good point to transition to it, because I don't consider Gen AI to be a trend anymore. I think it's moved beyond trend. It's a thing, right? It's here. And you touch on this in the book. I do want to ask you about some emerging trends that, we should be aware of in continuous improvement.
I mean, when I think of trends, there's really 3 dimensions. There's the people, process, and the technology aspects of the trends. So on the people side, you're going to need, because of the convergence of AI and other processes and that we're moving towards, and complexities that we're moving towards. And on the people side, learning AI is important, certainly, right? Learning how to use Gen AI. I agree with you. Gen AI is not going to go away. There's going to be some renditions that make it easier to use and more powerful, right? The idea of being able to generate agents with different roles and things like that. If you wanted to, let's say, review a requirement spec, then you want it to be reviewed from different perspectives. You might have agent roles for the product manager's perspective, an agent role from an operations perspective, an agent role from, a platform engineer. You can have all these different roles. So I think that's going to get easier. But people need to stay on top of what's happening with Gen AI, because it's not going to go away. And so that's the people side of it. And the technology, it's 2 different aspects. And again, a lot of it's AI, right? I mean, the AI augmented tools, where you have AI capabilities built into the tools and built into the platforms, and then AI assisted use of the tools. So I differentiate AI assisted from AI augmented. One of the things I find best in tools development is to separate the controlled from the controller. It's a basic system design concept that certainly predates me, right? But for some reason, I see, I've worked for a lot of tools vendors and so on, and that gets messed up too frequently, right? This idea, just an example. So many organizations think a CI/CD pipeline is all you need. No, you want to manage a CI/CD pipeline for the purpose of making a release. So you need a higher layer. There's a higher layer construct. Some people call that automated release orchestration or automated release automation. That's a layer above a CI/CD, and that should be separated from your CI/CD. Now, one pipeline doesn't make up a service. You can have multiple services with multiple frameworks. You need a value stream management layer on top of that. So there's actually 3 tiers, right? So from a tools point of view, I think integrating together, all the different many tools involved in, the quality testing, security, feedback aspects of a pipeline, managed by a well-engineered orchestration layer for a release, and all of that at the organization level for, value stream management platforms. I think that's where more organizations are going to move that way. Certainly a lot of the unicorns have known that for a long time. We did that back in Bell Northern in mid-'80s, right? It was all proprietary stuff, but we were doing that back then. And certainly with clients I talk to today, I try to help them understand why you need to separate those layers. On the process side, it's all about speed. I mean, you can talk about all the different benefits you like, but they all boil down to, one root thing, which is we got to do things faster. The faster you can do things, you got a competitive advantage. You can get higher quality, higher reliability, and all that. If you have speed, even if you have a problem, you can recover faster. So the idea of reliability changed over time, right? It used to be about mean time between failures. Now it's about how fast can you detect and recover. So it's all about speed. So process speed, being able to execute all of the different dimensions of what you need to do to get a quality product really quickly, which is not easy, right? Because there's so many different parts. I mean, I enumerate 43 different types of tests when I talk about test types, and they're not all relevant for every product, but in some cases, a lot of them are. How do you do all those tests, in seconds or minutes rather than hours or days or weeks or months, so that it's fast enough for the developer to do it? that's part of where I think processes are going. Highly parallelized, vertical and horizontal, scalability of the tools, making sure you separate, the tool purpose from the controller of the tool in the architecturally and things like that. Those are all part of the equation to really get to the higher levels of, of performance that organizations are going to move to. As long as, we're human and we keep thinking that what we need to do is move faster and be more competitive with each other, I think that's going to continue. If at some point in time we decide to relax and say, let's just have a more tranquil world, then maybe we don't need to do that, but I don't see that happening.
Sure sounds nice, though.
Yeah.
I wish we had more time, Marc. This has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for coming on. Would you be open to coming back?
Of course, anytime I'm in it. I have a lot of war stories and things we could talk about.
I feel like we've completely scratched the surface on just said it's a over 300-page book. So I feel like, of course, we're not going to get it all in.
Well, I'm already working on my next one. The next book's going to be called Transforming to AI-Assisted Continuous Security, because I'm really annoyed in that area as well. That the traditional DevSecOps. You can read some of my blogs on this, and SecOps. It's kind of like the old days of DevOps, right? Where they're separated. You walk around RSA and you find out, the SecOps guys don't talk to the DevSecOps guys, but a lot of the bad actors they don't see it that way. They see it as a big, open wound to work their way into. So, I think that's going to be a next big thing. So,
can't wait to have that conversation with you. And I would also personally love to get further into the shift right, shift left, shift. Are we shifting conversation? Because that's one that, Marcus and I have this conversation pretty much daily, I think, at this point. So, and I know you were published on DevOps.com on the topic, and I'm pretty sure I think mine's on DevOps. Yes, on DevOps.com on shift left is dead, which was a drastic statement, but made purposely. So I would love to get further into that one with you.
Sure.
So cool.
Absolutely.
Awesome. And thank you, Marcus. Thank you, Evelyn and Marc, for joining us. And thank you, our listeners. We appreciate the time that you give us on a weekly, 3 times a month. I don't know how you say that in short, but we really appreciate your time. And we will see you next time on Test Case Scenario.
Hasta luego.
Thank you for joining us on Test Case Scenario. Share your thoughts in the comments. We'll make sure to respond to each and every single one. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell to keep in touch. If you missed our last episode, it's popping up on your screen right now. Go, click it. Until next time on Test Case Scenario.